There is something that we don't say out loud in healthcare, and something that feels dangerous, probably taboo, it might even be a bit outrageous. But after 300 episodes of doing the You're Not a Frog podcast, hundreds of conversations with clinicians and leaders and coaches and people who are right on the edge of burnout, there's one truth that keeps coming back to me. Burnout isn't inevitable. And the reason it happens, it's not the reason that you think. Let me explain. Now, working in healthcare or any high stakes, high responsibility profession, it's like you're sitting in a kayak in a really fast flowing river. The current is really, really strong. The water is freezing. The pull downstream is relentless. Now, if your kayak drifts off downstream, that is not your fault. It's just what rivers do. They pull the boat with them. But yet, even in the strongest of rivers, you've still got oars in your kayak and you have the ability to row against the current. And in any moment, you are either paddling or you're drifting down the river. Now, drifting is actually a lot easier earlier on, and rowing feels a lot harder. Drifting leads somewhere, and so does rowing. And this is the foundation of the hardest lesson I've learned in all of these 300 episodes. And this is the truth that I really resisted for years. Burnout isn't just something that happens to us. Burnout is the direction in which we drift when we don't do the paddling that's needed. When actually the strokes that would protect us, they feel too hard, they feel too frightening, too guilt-inducing, or just too risky. Burnout is what happens when you do nothing. And it's not conscious, it's not deliberate, and this is definitely not blaming you, but it is a directional drift that's driven by the stories we tell ourselves, the identity that we have. And if that's making you feel uncomfortable or really defensive, then please stay with me. I get it. I am one of the people that have been in that kayak drifting and drifting. So this current, the current that's in the river that's taking you into inevitable burnout, that is not your fault. It's not your fault, but it is your problem. Unfortunately, unless you do some rowing against that current, you will end up in burnout. So this is not about blaming you. This is about agency. This is about choice. Now, when I talk about choice, I'm not talking about the luxury or freedom that we have a lot of in this country. When I talk about choice, I'm talking about the things that are in your control, that are inside your zone of power. I talk about the zone of power a lot in the podcast. It's a simple way of deciding what's in your control and what's outside of your control. It's that tiny bit of your life where your actions, your words, your boundaries you set, the responses you give, they are in your control. And here's the problem with choice. We often don't have all the choices that we want, but we still do have choices. And people often say to me, well, I don't have a choice. But what they really mean is I don't have the choice that I want. And I really, really get that. I would love the choice to make a living by singing on a West End stage, but I can't. Firstly, I'm too old and nobody would pay to watch that. I remember being on a business retreat in the Alps when I first started doing my coaching and training, and I was surrounded by a load of amazing people that have up sticks. They've moved their businesses and their families to the Alps, and they worked in the morning, went skiing in the afternoon. It was just a wonderful way of life. And I remember sitting amongst all these people thinking, well, it's all right for them. I don't have a choice. I have a family back in Cambridge. I have children at school. I have a husband who runs his own business. I don't have a choice. I can't just up and leave them. Then I realised, well, I do have a choice. Of course I have a choice. I could leave my family. I could move here, get a job in a bar. But I was choosing to stay with my family. I was choosing the life I was already in. I could walk away. I would have felt terrible if I had. And because of that, I was choosing to stay. So I wasn't trapped. I was choosing to prioritise my children, to honour my responsibilities. And for some reason, the minute you realise this is a choice that I'm making, something shifts. You feel much more powerful. A really stupid example is I'm choosing to pick my child up after football practice. You know, other people say to me, well, I have to. Well, you don't have to. If you didn't, they would be stuck on the corner of the road waiting for you, and you know, something bad might happen, but that is a choice you're making. Nobody's got a gun to your head saying you've got to do it. So recognising that everything we do is a choice, this is where freedom begins. But that's far too simplistic, isn't it? And that is completely ignoring what's gone on in the past, which makes some things that on the face of it are choices actually feel more like automatic reactions. So I've been doing some work myself. I'm seeing a therapist regularly. And as somebody who's had ADHD, been pretty impulsive all my life, I have got used to being the one in the wrong. I'm really good at taking blame. I'm really good at admitting failure and self-flagellating and think, oh, I'm such a bad person. I shouldn't have said that or I shouldn't have done that. But I realised that I was taking a lot of the blame from other people just dumping 10 tons of crap onto me. And I'd go, oh yeah, I'm so sorry. Yes, what have I done wrong? And all that sort of stuff. And I was accepting that label of being the difficult one. And I said to my therapist, why do I so quickly go into I'm the difficult one role? Why do I so quickly believe that? And she said to me, because it's familiar, it feels safe. Even though it's not a nice feeling, you know that you can survive that feeling because that's the role you've been put into all your life. So for me, taking the blame, feeling like I'm the bad one, that's felt safe because I know I can survive it. It's not particularly comfortable. And so for many of us, like exhaustion feels safe. We know we can survive it. We've been exhausted for years. Overworking feels safe. Self-sacrifice feels safe. And if I'm honest, a little bit honourable as well. Look how good I am. Look how self-sacrificial I am, even though it's not very comfortable in the moment. So burnout and being on the edge of burnout, while it's a horrible place to be, it's pretty familiar. And for some of us, it feels safe and it doesn't challenge our identity. In fact, sometimes, and I know I've thought this in the past, look how hard I'm working. Look how good I am. I'm on the edge of burnout. I must be a really good person here. It's a familiar feeling, isn't it? And that's what I mean when I say that burnout is this drift, this unconscious drift. We're drifting to what feels safe, actually, even when it's harming us. So it can be very tempting just to say, well, you know what? It's a choice to protect your time, to protect your energy, to protect your human limits. That is just a choice. It's a simple choice. But it's not simple. This choice is particularly hard for us. Now, I have a particular genetic makeup, and if someone brings a plate of freshly cooked cookies into the room, I will eat one. There's no way I could ignore that cookie. Now, other people would look at it and go, no, not for me, I'm not hungry. But for me, just the sight of that beautiful cookie will make me want to gobble it up. And I'm told that's something to do with genes and leptin levels and all things like that. But it makes it feel like a much harder choice to leave that cookie, whereas for some other people, they could just leave it. So I see cake, I want it. Now that doesn't make me weak. It just makes me wired differently. I still might want to leave it and make a healthy choice. The choice still exists, but it takes more awareness, it takes more effort, it takes more support to make the healthy choice and maybe ignore that cake. And the same goes for people who are really hotwired to please people, to rescue people, to fix people, to overfunction and overachieve. It's much harder for us to make the choice, the difficult choice, not to please everybody all the time, not to help everybody all the time. Those choices feel uncomfortable and the other choice feels almost automatic. And if you're wired in that way, and many, many doctors and healthcare professionals are, burnout feels the easier direction. But your wiring isn't your destiny. You can change your wiring. Now, I don't want to go any further without talking about the system, because let's face it, none of this denies the reality of the really, really toxic environments that many, many of us find ourselves in right now. And we know that the World Health Organization has defined burnout as an occupational syndrome. And I always think that burnout's a bit like lead poisoning. So if you're in a place where there's lead in the water and you're drinking the water, it's contaminated, you're going to get poisoned. Now, this is not your fault. But once you know that the water's contaminated, you'll start to look for other sources of water or filters or other taps. Or in the end, if you can't avoid the lead in the water, you'll look for a completely different source entirely. Not because you're weak, but because you just can't keep drinking that water with the lead in it. And so pretending the lead's not there and you just need to be stronger, that doesn't help anybody. So working all the time in really toxic environments, it's like drinking water that's poisoned with lead. The system isn't taking the lead out of the water as far as I can see at the moment. In fact, it's getting worse. There are things, however, that you need to try and do to stop exposing yourself to that lead. Now, that might be easier said than done. And when I started the You're Not a Frog podcast, it was based around the fact that frogs only have two choices: to burn out in the pan, to be poisoned by the lead, or to get out entirely. Now, you're not a frog. You can do things to turn down the heat, or you can go to a different pan or a different pond. It's totally your choice. And what I'm not saying is that it's okay just to stay in the pan as it is, because the water just is going to get hotter. The current's going to get stronger. The lead is going to accumulate. Inaction is also a choice that we're making. So am I saying that burnout is your fault? No, 100% not. Fault and responsibility are very, very difficult. Now, burnout is the predictable outcome of a very broken system. It's not your fault. Unfortunately, though, it is your problem. And when you see something as your problem, you can then take responsibility. You can then make choices. And this really empowers you. You can think, well, I'm not helpless. There are parts of this that I can control. And part of that is making different choices. If we think it's our fault, that just causes shame. The whole I'm not good enough if I'm burning out stuff. Let's just ditch that. If you've taken any messages from this podcast, it's definitely not that. If you are not coping in a toxic system, congratulations, you're human. But when we stop blaming ourselves and we start seeing the problem for what it is, this gives us freedom. So this episode is not about blame. It's about giving you back your agency, your choice, and your freedom. You may be listening and think, well, Rachel, you just don't understand my job. I literally can't say no. And you're right. Of course, I don't understand everybody's job. And some tasks that we have to do, they are non-negotiable. But if you wrote a list of everything that you can't say no to, I wonder if absolutely everything is written in stone in your job contract. Often the things that we can't say no to, they're not contractual, they're cultural, or they're identity-based, or they're guilt-based. It's this idea of, well, I should really. So I do ask people, what's in your job description? Lots of people don't even have one or haven't looked at it in years. And your contract doesn't require superhero performance. And if your job truly demands the impossible from you, something that is totally impossible for any human to deliver, then this is a system failure. You need to raise it. And if nothing changes, you need to get out. And if you're in charge, if you're a partner, you need to raise it with each other and just face reality and go, how can we make this actually doable? But in most cases, there are things that we can't refuse. But in most cases, the things that we can't refuse are the extra things that have just become invisible and we've just taken them on as our role when actually they are negotiable. There is no legal job description that says sacrifice yourself entirely. And in fact, the European Working Time Directive has come in to protect you from that. And I always hear people say, I can't say no, what about patient harm? But one thing I have learned from hundreds of keynote talks and training sessions is when I do a poll asking people, what's the main reason you can't say no? Is it severe patient harm? Or is it that you feel guilty, it's going to inconvenience somebody, or you're worried about what people might think? Every time, less than 20% of people have said it's because of patient harm. It's always because they're feeling guilty. They're worried about what other people are going to think. So it's not the job that's telling you can't say no. It's you telling yourself that. And it's fear, shame and guilt that's underneath all of that. You might also say to me, look, because the system is so broken, I don't have any choices. And yeah, I think the system is really broken at the moment, but you still have micro choices. The problem is they might not be the choices that you want, but they are choices nonetheless, even if it's just that choice to take a 10-minute lunch break outside the building or not take on that extra role. And we often ignore these small choices because they're not sort of dramatic enough. I remember a coachee I had once. She knew she had to cut down her sessions and the surgery were really, really short-staffed. And she told me that she knew the answer was going to be no. So she was preparing to hand in her resignation. So we talked about it a little bit and she was going to go for this real dramatic change of just handing in her notice and doing something differently. And I said to her, have you even had a conversation about this? A few weeks later, I bumped into her. She had a massive smile on her face. She said, Rachel, I asked for the unaskable. I asked for what I needed. And you know what? Rather than lose me completely, they said, yes, that's fine. So many of us haven't even said what we need. We haven't even made a reasonable request. Now, I'm not talking about demanding. I'm talking about reasonable requests. And side note, Those of us who are neurodivergent, there may be some small tweaks we can make to the way that we work that will make a huge difference. Maybe start times or finish times, or the way we organise our workload. But a lot of us haven't even sat still for long enough to work out what we need, let alone ask for it. So you can't fix the whole system, but you can probably direct your boat a little bit more. You can steer your kayak just a couple of degrees. And a couple of degrees every day becomes many, many degrees in a year. The other thing you might be thinking is, you're speaking from privilege, Rachel, and I get that. We all have responsibilities, children, finances, the culture we're in, ageing parents, identity pressures. But here's the truth. Really hard choices, they're still choices. And I've known too many people who've burnt out completely or even become incredibly ill because they felt they had no choice. And afterwards, everyone said, they should have stopped. They should have told us. Nobody would have blamed them. And lots of people who burnt out, when I've got really curious and said to them, look, if you look back, what would you have done differently? They all say, well, I would have made these changes much earlier, but I just felt I didn't have a choice for all sorts of different reasons. I felt stuck. And it might have been a financial reason. It might have been a responsibility to kids or parents. But everybody with the benefit of hindsight said, yeah, I could have made that choice and I could have made it earlier. I want to tell you quickly about a moment where I got choices totally wrong. So a couple of years ago, I was scheduled to deliver a really big webinar in the evening. There were hundreds of people attending. There was a colleague that was relying on me. And we had a client who was paying for a really professional experience. And a friend of mine from medical school asked me to run a team building session for her at her practice. And because I didn't want to disappoint her, and saying no just felt too difficult because we also needed the income for the business, I said yes. And then I realised that these two events overlapped and tried to make it work. And she told me that her Wi-Fi at home wasn't great. And any sensible person would have said, okay, this just won't work. But I said, well, we'll make something work. It'll be fine. So I ended up in her son's bedroom trying to deliver this webinar, perched between this wardrobe and a bed with the Wi-Fi dropping every few minutes. And I ended up letting my colleague down, letting the client down. I let down the participants and I really let myself down. And the next day I had to drive off first thing in the morning and deliver just another session. I was exhausted and I felt really, really ashamed. I tried to rescue one person, ended up just disappointing everybody. And it wasn't because I was careless, but disappointing her, missing out on some income, that felt too difficult. It felt like a choice I couldn't make. And this is how doctors burn out. Not from lack of care, but actually they care too much. So here's the deepest truth that I've learned after 300 episodes. Burnout is often the unconscious choice that we make when disappointing somebody else feels more dangerous than destroying ourselves. Not because we're weak, but it's because we've been conditioned to be the good one, the reliable one, the self-sacrificial one. This isn't blame. This is just clarity. And when we get clarity, we get our power back. So does this mean we're choosing burnout? No, of course we're not choosing burnout. But one thing we get wrong about choices is that we don't realise that we're always making them. Every time we choose not to enforce a boundary is a choice to actually carry more. Every time we avoid a difficult conversation, we're making a choice to let this difficult behaviour continue. And so every time we don't make a difficult choice, we're choosing to let the river pull us down. We're not choosing nothing. We're not choosing the neutral version. We're choosing to head further down the river, further into burnout. Every time we say, I'll just do it, it's easier if I just do it, we're heading on down the river in the wrong direction. And this is not resilience victim blaming. That's the thing I hate the most. Resilience victim blaming says, we're making you work in this incredibly difficult system and it's your fault if you're not resilient enough to cope with it. Absolute rubbish. I'm saying you shouldn't have to cope. The system is really unreasonable and any normal human being would be responding in exactly the way that you are. The system is unreasonable and you still have micro choices that genuinely protect you. The system will try and blame you for burning out. I think the system has all the character traits of a narcissist. The system will also blame you for setting boundaries. You genuinely can't win. You can't win on their terms. Let's play a different game. Other people say, I just can't change my wiring. And a quick note here about neurodivergence. I can't change my wiring with ADHD. It's not an excuse, but it is a reason why actually I'm more prone to burnout, because there are things that I find more difficult that expend more energy during the day. I can't change that. I can't change what's happened to me in my past, all those stories, all that conditioning I've had. Your stories are real, your wiring is real, your conditioning is real, but wiring is not your destiny. You can change some of it. You can change some of those stories that you're telling yourself. You can just become aware of it, and you can practice small actions that will change your wiring. You can have therapy, you can have coaching to help you understand yourself. And for me, just understanding what's going on has been absolutely transformative. Because if you're aware, then you can practice the shifts that you need. And just like that cake metaphor, me seeing a cake and wanting it, it's not like I'm going to see a cake and never want it, but I can be aware of what's causing me to really, really want it, and then make a choice based on that information. Awareness gives choice. So yes, some wiring never changes, but other things like mindset, beliefs, that can all change. And a couple more things that stop us making these choices that avoid burnout. Well, one of the main ones is, if I say no, people will think I don't care. You're right, they might. We can't control that. The right people, the people that know you, they know the truth. And saying yes to everything, it's not kindness. It just sort of erases yourself. Real care has boundaries, and you have just as much right to care and compassion as everybody else. And as I said in a podcast a few weeks ago, this whole thing about saying no and people pleasing, sometimes it's much less about not wanting to upset people, and it's much more about wanting to control other people's opinion of me. And what a lot of ego there is in that, right? So sometimes we do need to name it for what it is. Now, some people might also say that, you know what, if you're talking about the choices that you have to make to avoid burnout, what you're doing is just excusing the system. But I think it's the opposite. While you make the unconscious choice to drift towards burnout, the system is going to stay the same, right? Because while you are absorbing all the consequences of a broken system, why on earth would it change? It's got no reason to, right? Systems only change when the humans stop absorbing all the consequences. If you say yes to everything and do everything, well, the system never has to feel where the breakages are. Nobody else will take responsibility. So when you stop absorbing it, other people have to face reality. Just think of a colleague who's constantly wanting to swap shifts or get cover for their shifts. If you did that all the time, they would never have to take responsibility of getting their life in order and actually being able to do the stuff that they've been rotated on to do. When you absorb the consequences for other people, you're not letting them learn. The system is never going to change. Change will only begin when self-sacrifice is ending. And one huge reason why people find the drift into burnout almost easier than doing anything about it is it just we're too overwhelmed to even know where to start. So can I offer one question that will help with this? I'd love you just to pause and ask yourself, if my life were a film, what would the audience be yelling at their screens right now? Don't go downstairs without the light on. He's behind you. Don't do that. What would we be yelling? You know, if you pause long enough to ask yourself. And it doesn't have to be something huge. It can be something tiny. Just one small change. Just moving the direction of the boat by 1 degree. So when you see burnout as this drift, this unconscious choice you make rather than as being inevitable, then actually everything changes. And you can realise that you're not broken, you're not weak, and you are not doomed to inevitable burnout. You're a human being with choices. Because you are not a frog. You are not just passively boiling in someone else's pot while they turn the heat up and down. You are also not your job. You are not a cog in the machine. And you are not the machine. You're not a martyr either. Your job description does not include sacrificing yourself to this job. You're a human being with a really tired nervous system, and you really care deeply, and you have choices. You have really hard, difficult choices, like choosing to disappoint people, because, side note, you can never please everybody all of the time. You also have really small choices. What you eat for lunch if you stop for a break. you can turn this boat around. You can rest. You can let other people down and still be good. And here's what I want you to remember. Burnout isn't your fault, but burnout isn't inevitable. It's a direction we drift towards when the choices that protect us feel more frightening than the ones that destroy us. You can make those small choices to start to paddle upstream rather than just drift towards burnout. And if enough of us decide to make those choices, then that's going to shift everything in the river. And this is a hard truth, but it's one I needed to hear. And before we finish this 300th episode, I just want to say thank you, because I am not the person I was when I started this podcast. It's really changed me more than anything else I've ever done in my professional life. And it's changed me because of you, the listeners, the guests, my colleagues, everybody who's attended FrogFest, my FrogXtra members, and people who share the episodes, who recommend them to trainees or patients or appraisees. I'm so grateful. And as you know, this podcast is completely free. It takes a huge amount of time, cost and effort, and we can only keep going because of those of you who support us through our FrogXtra and FrogXtra Gold memberships, by coming to our workshops, by booking me to speak at events. So I want to say thank you truly from the bottom of my heart. And I just want to end on a small request from me. If you've enjoyed this episode, if you enjoyed the podcast, if it's helped you ever, please could you leave me a review? That will be my 300th episode gift. It just helps other people find the podcast too. And please continue recommending it to colleagues and friends and family. And if you want bonus episodes, videos, live events, or just want to support the show, then you can join our FrogXtra memberships. All the details are in the show notes. So here's to the next 300 episodes together. Please remember, you have a choice. You are not a frog.